They say you never really know someone until crisis reveals their true nature. I discovered this truth on an ordinary Tuesday morning, watching my husband of 43 years pack his belongings while telling me I'd become dead weight. I'm Vivian Hartley. I'm 68 years old, and this is the story of how my husband's cruelty became the greatest gift of my life. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. There's something powerful about knowing we're not alone in our struggles, no matter how far apart we are. It was March 15th. I remember because it was the anniversary of the day we'd opened Hartley & Associates, the consulting firm that had been our shared dream for 2 decades. I'd made Robert's favorite breakfast, buttermilk pancakes with real maple syrup. I'd even put on the pearl earrings he'd given me on our 30th anniversary. He came downstairs in his navy suit, the one I'd picked up from the dry cleaners the day before. He looked at the breakfast spread and said, "We need to talk." Those 4 words. Every woman over 50 knows the dread they carry. I sat down, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for my coffee. Robert remained standing. That should have been my first clue. He wanted the power position. "Vivian, I'm leaving," he said, his voice flat, rehearsed. "I've met someone who understands my needs, someone who can keep up with me." The room tilted. We'd built everything together, the business, our home in Portland, Oregon, our 2 grown children, 43 years of shared history, and he'd reduced it all to a prepared statement. "What are you talking about?" I managed to say. "Is this about my hip replacement? Robert, I'm fully recovered. The doctor said—" "It's not just the hip," he interrupted. "It's everything. You've become comfortable, complacent. I need someone with vitality, someone who enhances my life instead of anchoring it down." The clinical way he spoke, as if I were a failing business asset rather than his wife, that's what cut deepest. "Her name is Crystal," he continued. "She's 34. She's been my physical therapist, and we've developed a connection, a real connection. She sees my potential. She motivates me." 34. I did the math involuntarily. She was 4 years younger than our daughter, Lindsay. "You're having an affair with your physical therapist?" The words came out strangled, disbelieving. "I'm choosing to move forward with someone who adds value to my life," he said, as if rephrasing it made the betrayal more palatable. "You've become dead weight, Vivian, and I don't have time left to carry it." Dead weight. Those words burned themselves into my brain. Dead weight. As if our entire marriage, all my contributions, every sacrifice I'd made while he built his career, as if none of it mattered. As if I didn't matter. He left that afternoon with 2 suitcases and the BMW. He left behind 43 years of marriage, our business, and a woman who would soon realize that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the beginning of your greatest transformation. I just didn't know it yet. For 3 days after Robert left, I didn't leave our bedroom. Our daughter Lindsay flew in from Chicago, her face a mixture of fury and heartbreak. Our son Marcus drove up from San Francisco, his jaw clenched so tight I worried he'd crack a tooth. "Mom, we can fight this," Marcus said, pacing the bedroom like a caged animal. "Dad can't just walk away from everything." But I couldn't think about fighting. I couldn't think about anything except those 2 words, dead weight. I'd spent my entire adult life as Robert's partner. I'd put my own career aspirations aside when the kids were young. I'd been the one who managed the household, coordinated the social calendar that advanced his career, entertained clients at dinner parties, where I made sure every detail was perfect. When he'd wanted to start Hartley & Associates 12 years ago, I'd helped him develop the business plan. I'd been there for every major decision, and now I was dead weight. Lindsay sat on the edge of my bed, holding my hand. "Dad's having a midlife crisis," she said. Or an end-of-life crisis, more accurately. "He's 71, Mom. This is pathetic." "He seems quite certain it's not a crisis," I said quietly. "He seems quite certain I'm the problem." The truth was more complicated than my children knew. Over the past 5 years, since I'd turned 63, Robert had been changing. little comments about my appearance, suggestions that I should stay active and keep up. When I'd needed the hip replacement last year after years of pain, he'd been resentful rather than supportive. The recovery had taken 4 months, and apparently that had been 4 months too long for Robert's patience. On the 4th day, I finally got out of bed. I showered, dressed in real clothes, and went downstairs to face the house that suddenly felt enormous and empty. On the kitchen counter, I found an envelope with my name written in Robert's precise handwriting. Inside was a letter, typed, not handwritten, explaining that he'd spoken with his attorney. He was willing to offer me a generous settlement, the house and half his personal savings. He would retain full ownership of Hartley & Associates, the business we'd built together. After all, as he wrote, "You've never been officially involved in operations." Never been officially involved in operations. I read that line 3 times. It was technically true. My name wasn't on the corporate documents. Robert had always said it was simpler that way, cleaner for tax purposes. I'd trusted him. I'd been his unofficial partner, his sounding board, his behind-the-scenes support. I knew every client, every contract, every challenge that business had faced, but I had no legal claim to it. The settlement offer was insulting. The house was worth perhaps $800,000. His personal savings would be split, giving me maybe $400,000 more. Hartley & Associates was worth at least $5 million, possibly more. In Oregon, a community property state, I should have been entitled to half of everything acquired during our marriage. But Robert was betting I'd be too broken, too tired, too much of that dead weight to fight him. He'd made a terrible miscalculation. Something shifted inside me as I read that letter. Something that had been dormant, suppressed, set aside for decades. It was anger, yes. But it was more than that. It was awakening. I called my friend Patricia the next morning. We'd known each other for 30 years. Our sons had played Little League together. Patricia was a retired attorney who'd specialized in family law before launching her own mediation practice. "I need you to be honest with me," I said when she arrived at my house that afternoon. "What are my realistic options here?" Patricia reviewed Robert's settlement offer, her expression darkening with each paragraph. Finally, she set the papers down and looked at me directly. "Vivian, this is insulting. He's counting on you accepting this because you're hurt and overwhelmed. Don't." "But I'm not on any of the business documents," I said. "He made sure of that." "Doesn't matter. Oregon recognizes contributions to a marriage beyond official documentation. You helped build that business. You supported his career. You were a full partner in everything but name." She leaned forward. "Question is, are you willing to fight?" Was I willing to fight? 24 hours earlier, I would have said no. I would have taken the insulting offer and tried to rebuild some semblance of a life with what remained. But something had changed. Maybe it was the clinical coldness of that typed letter. Maybe it was the image of Robert with a woman young enough to be his granddaughter, rewriting our history as if I'd been nothing but an anchor. "Yes," I said. "I'm willing to fight." Patricia smiled. "Good, because I did some preliminary research, and there's something you should know about Hartley & Associates." She pulled out her laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was the business's financial summary for the past year. "Robert's been doing very well," she said. "Better than you probably realized. The business grossed $7 million last year. His client list includes some major corporations. And here's the interesting part." She clicked to another document. 3 of his biggest contracts came through connections you made." I stared at the screen. She was right. The Brennan manufacturing contract had come through my college roommate's husband. The Westfield Properties deal had started at a dinner party I'd hosted. The Morrison Tech consultation had happened because I'd met their CEO at a charity auction and spent 2 hours talking to him about his challenges, then introduced him to Robert. "This isn't even about what you're legally owed," Patricia said. "This is about recognizing what you actually contributed. You weren't just his wife, Vivian. You were his secret weapon." Over the next week, Patricia and I dug deeper. We discovered that Robert had been systematically undervaluing the business to prepare for the divorce. We found evidence of diverted funds, personal expenses run through the business accounts. We uncovered that Crystal wasn't just his physical therapist. She'd been on the business payroll for 8 months as a wellness consultant, whatever that meant. But the most revealing discovery came when I accessed our old email account, the one we'd shared for years before Robert insisted on separate accounts. There, I found the truth about how Robert ran Hartley and Associates, and I realized something crucial. I didn't just understand his business, I understood it better than he did. The question was, what was I going to do with that knowledge? Patricia's paralegal had compiled a devastating file. Robert had been careless with digital records, and his arrogance had made him sloppy. But as I reviewed the evidence of his financial manipulations and business practices, an idea began forming. An idea that was bold, possibly reckless, but felt absolutely right. "Patricia," I said during our meeting the following Monday, "what if I don't want to just fight for half the business?" She looked up from her notes, her eyebrows raised. "What do you mean? What if I want to compete with him?" The words hung in the air between us. Patricia set down her pen, studying my face carefully. "You want to start your own consulting firm? I know his clients. I know his methods. I know his weaknesses." I felt energy coursing through me for the first time in weeks. Robert always took credit for my insights. What if I stopped letting him? "That's ambitious," Patricia said carefully. "Starting a business at 68. "Don't," I interrupted, hearing the echo of Robert's cruel assessment in her words. "Don't tell me I'm too old." That's what he said, that I was dead weight. Patricia's expression shifted. "I wasn't going to say you're too old. I was going to say starting a business at any age requires capital, strategy, and perfect timing. Do you have a plan?" Over the next 3 hours, we outlined a strategy. I would use my settlement money, not to retire quietly, but to launch Hartley Consulting Group, not and Associates, just my name, clean, clear, mine. The key was timing and clients. I knew Robert's contracts inside and out. I knew which clients were unhappy with his recent performance. I'd heard the complaints at dinner parties, seen the tension in follow-up meetings. Robert had become complacent, coasting on reputation while delivering mediocre results. I also had something he didn't, genuine relationships with these people. While Robert had been networking, I'd been connecting. I remembered their spouses' names, their children's colleges, their personal challenges. Business isn't just about strategies and deliverables, it's about trust. My first call was to Margaret Chen, the CFO of Brennan Manufacturing. I'd known Margaret for 15 years, ever since I'd introduced her to Robert at a conference. "Margaret, this is Vivian Hartley. I'm calling to let you know that Robert and I are divorcing, and I'm starting my own consulting firm. I wanted to reach out personally because I know your contract with Hartley and Associates is up for renewal in 2 months." There was a pause. Then, "Vivian, I'm so sorry to hear about the divorce, but I'm not sorry to hear about your new venture. Can we meet?" That conversation led to 3 more calls. Each one opened a door. These were people who knew my contributions, even if Robert had taken credit for them. They'd watched me analyze problems at social gatherings, offer insights over dinner, and connect dots that Robert had missed. Within 2 weeks, I had 4 serious prospects. Within a month, I'd signed my first contract with Brennan Manufacturing for exactly the same services Robert had been providing, but at a slightly lower rate and with a promise of more personalized attention. Robert's company had just lost its second largest client, and I was just getting started. The next 6 months were the most intense period of my life. I worked 16-hour days, running the business from a converted bedroom in my house until I could afford proper office space. I hired 2 young consultants, both women over 50 who'd been pushed out of traditional corporate roles and were hungry to prove themselves. We weren't just a consulting firm, we were a rebellion. Robert, meanwhile, was too busy with Crystal to notice the bleeding at first. By the time he realized what was happening, I'd taken 3 of his major clients and was in serious discussions with 2 more. He showed up at my house on a Wednesday evening in October, 7 months after he'd left. I was working at the dining room table, surrounded by contract proposals and financial projections. When the doorbell rang, I assumed it was a delivery. Instead, it was my husband, my ex-husband, I reminded myself, standing on the porch looking disheveled and angry. "You're sabotaging my business," he said without preamble. "I'm competing with your business," I corrected, not inviting him in. "There's a difference." "You stole my clients." "I didn't steal anyone, Robert. They chose to work with me. There's no non-compete clause preventing me from starting a consulting firm. Your lawyer made sure of that in the divorce papers, remember? You wanted to make sure I couldn't claim any ownership of Hartley and Associates." His face reddened. "This is vindictive. This is you trying to hurt me." I almost laughed. This man had called me dead weight, abandoned me for a woman less than half my age, and tried to cheat me out of my fair share of our assets. And I was the vindictive one? No, Robert. This is me refusing to disappear quietly. This is me realizing that I was never dead weight. I was the foundation you were standing on, and now that foundation has shifted. He sputtered, searching for words. "You can't do this. You don't have the experience, the credentials." "I have the relationships," I interrupted. "I have the insights, and apparently, I have the clients." Margaret Chen told me something interesting. She said she'd been wanting to switch consultants for over a year but felt loyal to our family. Once I was out of the picture, her loyalty to you evaporated pretty quickly. If you've ever felt underestimated because of your age, your gender, or someone else's cruelty, hit that subscribe button right now. This story gets better, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Robert's jaw clenched. "This isn't over." "You're right," I agreed. "It's not, because in 6 months I'm going after your other major contracts. I'm going to every client meeting with better proposals, better rates, and better results. You taught me the business, Robert. You just forgot that I was paying attention." He left without another word, and I returned to my work. But my hands were shaking. Not with fear or regret, but with exhilaration. For 43 years, I'd lived in Robert's shadow, supporting his ambitions while setting aside my own. Now, at 68, I was discovering what I was truly capable of, and I was capable of so much more than he'd ever imagined. By the end of my first year in business, Hartley Consulting Group had revenues of $2 million. We'd taken 6 of Robert's former clients and secured 4 new ones who'd never worked with him. I'd moved into a small but elegant office space in downtown Portland, hired 2 more consultants, and established a reputation for delivering results ahead of schedule. Robert's company, by contrast, was struggling. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd lost several more clients beyond the ones who'd come to me. His reputation had suffered, partly because of the quality drop in his work, but also because word had spread about how he'd left his wife of 4 decades. In our industry, character matters. People do business with people they trust and respect. Abandoning your aging wife for a woman younger than your daughter doesn't inspire trust. Crystal, it turned out, was more interested in his bank account than his business acumen. She'd convinced him to invest in her wellness consulting expansion, a vanity project that drained resources without generating revenue. Robert had also started taking expensive vacations, buying flashy things, living the lifestyle of a man trying to prove he was still young and vital. It was pathetic and expensive. Meanwhile, I was living modestly, reinvesting profits back into the business and focusing on sustainable growth. My team was lean but talented. We treated our clients like partners, not transactions. We delivered exceptional work because we genuinely cared about results, not just billable hours. In May, exactly 14 months after Robert had left me, I got a call from James Morrison, CEO of Morrison Tech, one of Robert's oldest and most lucrative clients. "Vivian, I'm calling because we're reviewing our consulting contracts," he said. "I've been impressed with what I've heard about your firm. Would you be interested in submitting a proposal?" I kept my voice professionally neutral. "I'd be very interested. Morrison Tech was always one of my favorite clients to work with." Was it? James sounded surprised. I didn't realize you were that involved with the account. I wasn't officially involved, I said, choosing my words carefully, but I attended most of your dinner meetings with Robert. I probably spent more time listening to your challenges than he did. Robert was always good at presenting solutions. I was the one who usually helped him figure out what those solutions should be. There was a long pause. That's enlightening, James said. I'd like to schedule a meeting. Would next Tuesday work? It worked perfectly. The Morrison Tech contract was worth $800,000 annually. It was Robert's largest client. And after a 3-hour presentation where I outlined not just what they needed now, but what they'd need over the next 5 years, they signed with me. When the contract was finalized, I allowed myself 1 glass of champagne in my office, alone. Not in celebration of taking something from Robert, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't satisfying, but in recognition of my own capabilities. I'd spent decades believing Robert was the talented one, the visionary. I was just the support system. But standing in my office that evening, looking at the signed contract on my desk, I realized the truth. I'd always been talented. I'd always been visionary. I'd just been investing all that talent and vision in someone else's success instead of my own. Robert showed up at my office on a Thursday afternoon in late August, unannounced. My assistant, Jennifer, a sharp 62-year-old former executive who'd been retired by her last company, buzzed me with barely concealed amusement. "Vivian, your ex-husband is here. He says he needs to speak with you urgently. Should I tell him you're in a meeting?" I considered it, but curiosity won. "Give me 5 minutes, then send him in." I used those 5 minutes to organize my desk, display the Morrison Tech contract prominently, and prepare myself emotionally for whatever was coming. When Robert walked in, I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight, the unhealthy kind that comes from stress, not exercise. His suit was expensive but hung awkwardly, as if he'd bought it in a different size. His face was drawn, and there were deep circles under his eyes. He looked older than 72. He looked defeated. "Vivian," he said, his voice lacking its usual authority. "Thank you for seeing me." I gestured to the chair across from my desk and said nothing. Make him work for it, I thought. He sat down, glancing around my office. I could see him taking inventory, the artwork, the diplomas I'd finally framed from my MBA program completed 20 years ago, the photos of my team at our recent company retreat, and, I was certain, the Morrison Tech contract displayed prominently. "Your business is doing well," he said finally. "Yes, it is." "You took Morrison Tech." "They chose to work with me," I corrected. "I gave them a better proposal with better terms and better results. That's how business works, Robert." He flinched. "Good. Vivian, I came here because I need help." The words seemed to physically pain him. Hartley and Associates is in trouble, real trouble. I've lost most of my major clients. The ones I have left are threatening to leave. Crystal's wellness division lost $300,000. I'm looking at possibly having to close the business. I waited, my face impassive. He'd called me dead weight. He'd offered me an insulting settlement. He'd tried to erase my contributions to everything we'd built together. And now he needed help? "I was hoping we could merge our companies," he continued, the words tumbling out faster now. "Combine resources. You could be a partner, a real partner this time. We could rebuild together." "Rebuild," I repeated slowly. "Together?" "Yes, we were always a good team, Vivian. I realize that now. I made mistakes. I see that, but we could—" "No." The word landed between us like a judge's gavel. "No?" He looked genuinely shocked, as if he'd expected me to leap at the chance to rescue him. "No, Robert, I don't want to merge our companies. I don't want to be your partner. I don't want to rebuild together. I want to continue building my company, which is thriving precisely because it doesn't include you." His face cycled through emotions: disbelief, anger, desperation. "But I'm offering you a real partnership this time. Equal stake, equal decision-making." You're offering me the chance to save your failing business, I corrected. That's not the same thing. Robert's desperation was transforming into anger before my eyes. I recognized the shift. I'd seen it countless times during our marriage when things didn't go his way. You're being vindictive, he said, his voice rising. You're letting your hurt feelings destroy what we could rebuild. My hurt feelings? I kept my tone level, refusing to match his energy. Robert, you called me dead weight. You left me for a woman young enough to be your granddaughter. You tried to cheat me out of my fair share of our assets. And now that your choices have consequences, you want me to rescue you. I admitted I made mistakes. You admitted you need something from me. That's not the same as taking responsibility. He stood up, pacing now. So this is revenge? You're going to watch. My business failed just to punish me? I'm not watching anything, I said firmly. I'm busy building my own success. Your failure isn't my responsibility or my concern. It's simply the natural outcome of your decisions. Crystal was a mistake, he said suddenly, switching tactics. I see that now. She left me last month, took $50,000 and moved to Arizona with some yoga instructor. I was a fool. Yes, you were. He stopped pacing, staring at me. Is there nothing left between us? 43 years of marriage, and you feel nothing? I considered his question carefully. Did I feel nothing? No, I felt many things, but what I felt most was clarity. I feel sorry for you, Robert. I feel disappointed that you wasted the last years of your life chasing some fantasy of youth instead of appreciating what you had. I feel angry at the time I lost supporting your dreams while ignoring my own. But what I don't feel is any obligation to save you from yourself. So you'll just let Hartley and Associates die? The business we built together? The business you built, I corrected, throwing his own words back at him. Remember? I was never officially involved in operations. That's what you wrote in your settlement letter. That business is yours, Robert, all yours, and what you do with it is entirely up to you. He sank back into the chair, looking smaller somehow. I don't know what to do, he admitted quietly. I don't know how to fix this. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old sympathy, the old instinct to help him, to solve his problems. 43 years of conditioning doesn't disappear overnight, but I'd learned something crucial over the past 18 months. His problems were not my problems. His success was not my responsibility, and my compassion didn't require me to set myself on fire to keep him warm. Robert, I'm going to tell you something important, and I need you to really hear it, I said. You're 72 years old. You made choices that destroyed your marriage and damaged your business. Those choices have consequences, but you're not dead. You're not incapable. If you want to save your business, save it. If you want to rebuild your reputation, rebuild it. But do it yourself. I'm done carrying your weight. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. I loved you, Vivian. Maybe you did, I said softly, but not enough. Robert left my office that day and I never saw him again in person. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard that he eventually sold Hartley and Associates to a larger firm for a fraction of what it had once been worth. He moved to Arizona, presumably chasing Crystal, though I never confirmed that. It didn't matter. My focus was entirely on my own trajectory, and that trajectory was extraordinary. By the end of my second year, Hartley Consulting Group had revenues of $4 million. By the end of year 3, we'd reached $8 million. I'd expanded the team to 12 consultants, opened a second office in Seattle, and established a reputation as one of the most innovative consulting firms in the Pacific Northwest. But the numbers, impressive as they were, weren't what mattered most. What mattered was the culture we'd built. More than half my team were women over 50 who'd been underestimated, undervalued, or pushed out of their previous positions. We'd created an environment where experience was valued, where age was an asset, and where everyone's contributions were recognized and rewarded. Lindsay and Marcus watched my transformation with a mixture of pride and amazement. Lindsay admitted to me over dinner one evening, Mom, I spent my whole childhood thinking Dad was the impressive one. I'm sorry it took this long to realize how extraordinary you've always been. Marcus was more direct. Dad's an idiot. I told him that, by the way. Last time we spoke, I made it very clear what I thought of how he treated you. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came from an unexpected source. I received an email from Margaret Chen at Brennan Manufacturing 3 years after that first contract. Vivian, I wanted you to know that the work your team did for us didn't just solve our operational challenges. It transformed our entire approach to business. You've been the best consulting partner we've ever had. Thank you for taking the risk of starting over when you could have just accepted defeat. You've inspired more people than you know. I read that email 3 times, then saved it in a special folder labeled Reminders. On the 4th anniversary of the day Robert had left, I threw a party. Not a sad remembrance of what I'd lost, but a celebration of what I'd built. My team attended, along with several clients who'd become genuine friends. Patricia was there, raising her glass in a toast. To Vivian, who proved that the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's success. But it wasn't about revenge anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. It was about reclamation, reclaiming my value, my potential, my voice, and my future. I thought about those words Robert had used, dead weight, and how they'd felt like a death sentence at the time, how they'd cut so deeply because part of me had wondered if he was right. Had I become complacent? Had I lost something vital? But standing in my office that evening, surrounded by people who valued me, who respected me, who saw my worth, I realized the truth. I'd never been dead weight. I'd been a rocket waiting for someone to remove the anchor. Robert had been that anchor. And now I was flying. Today, 5 years after Robert walked out calling me dead weight, Hartley Consulting Group has annual revenues of $12 million. We've grown to 23 team members across 3 offices. We specialize in helping mid-sized companies navigate complex organizational challenges, and we're known for our innovative approaches and genuine commitment to our clients' success. But this story isn't really about business metrics or financial revenge. It's about the moment you realize that someone else's assessment of you, even someone you loved, someone you trusted, someone you built a life with, is just their opinion. Not truth, not destiny, just one person's limited and self-serving perspective.